Welcome to the GCSJ Roundtable, hosted by the Centre for Global Challenges and Social Justice at the Open University. Our topic today is AI opportunities, responses on implications for research and teaching.
Thank you ever so much for everyone to coming to this roundtable conversation around AI opportunities, the implications for research and teaching. This roundtable has come about largely as a result of the ongoing conversations within SSGS around AI and its use over the past several months, and as well as both the academic, teaching and professional staff, and what does that mean for us. And so we have all the speakers have kindly contributed their time to this discussion, and we have speakers from across different faculties at the OU. We have 10 speakers today, which is quite a bit. So everyone will be giving their contribution for about 4 to 5 minutes, in which they'll be providing us with sort of their position on the idea and questions on what is their position on the question of AI opportunities, with a question mark, and I think the question mark is crucial. And what are the ethical, practical implications of using AI in research and teaching? And hopefully, as we progress with this conversation, the speakers will also engage with what people coming before them will say, and what does that mean as we move forward this conversation. So the first 60 minutes are, in fact, devoted to the speakers giving the contributions on the conversation there, and then following that we will open up for the Q&A. For those who will be here beyond the 60 minutes, we look forward to the questions at that point. To remind everyone, this will be recorded, at least the first bits, the speaker contributions will be recorded, and they'll be available later on the GCSJ YouTube page, as well as our website. So with that in mind, I would just quickly introduce all the 10 speakers that we have today, which is Mustafa Ali, Catherine Median, Suzanne Newcomb, Matthew Cook, Soraya Kodari, Emmanuel Narte, John Domingo, Sonia Ruhan, Dan Taylor, and Tracy Farrell. And that's also the speaking order, but I will make sure that we have the speaking order organized and keep track to that. So once again, welcome to everyone, both the audiences and the speakers. And without any delay, I will start us off with Mustafa.
Thank you, Gunjan. Can you hear me okay? Excellent. Okay, so in what follows, I should like to offer a few high-level remarks with a view to perhaps setting the scene for this roundtable discussion, aimed at open and critical exploration of the concerns, questions, and opportunities regarding the use of AI within teaching and learning. In the description for this event, reference was made to the opening page of the AI Opportunities Action Plan presented by the Secretary of State of Science, Innovation and Technology in January 2025, where it is stated that, and I quote, "In this next phase of AI development, we want Britain to step up, to shape the AI revolution, rather than wait to see how it shapes us," end of quote. For my part, I think there is a need to take a pause, notwithstanding the ostensibly accelerating pace of developments within tech, and ask some questions concerning the nature of this AI revolution and how to respond to it. To begin with, and at the risk of getting bogged down in semantics, I think there is a need to ask what the terms AI and revolution mean in this phrase, who gets to define them, and why we should accept these definitions. I want to set out my stall here and state that regardless as to whether we are talking about symbolic, connectionist, robotic, or any hybrid combination of such approaches, AI is always already a socio-technical assemblage. And I suggest that this holds true for generative AI, which is presumably the prime focus of our discussion today. Then there is the matter of the ongoing development of AI, assuming there is some consensus about what is meant by that term. Does it really amount to a revolution? Or, as the description for this event stated, might it just be another fad waiting for its bubble to burst, as some experts caution? Yet even assuming an AI revolution is underway, Is this revolution inevitable? Is it desirable? Can it be resisted? Should it be resisted? Returning to that statement from the AI Opportunities Action Plan, the we that wants Britain to step up to shape the AI revolution is central government. But notwithstanding the government claiming to represent wider society and act in its interest, does it really talk on its behalf? What of opposition to this alleged AI revolution within wider society? Where do we stand on this issue, assuming there is a we beyond the obvious collective that is the institution? For my part, the question mark in the title of this roundtable is important, since it opens a line of critical interrogation about the opportunities associated with the use of AI in teaching and research, viz., what kinds of opportunities and for whom? And thinking about the ethics of AI use in relational terms, especially given the university's stated commitment to advancing social justice, I suggest the need to consider corresponding threats, again, what kinds and for whom, in an expanding contextual frame, institutional, sectoral, national, regional, and ultimately global. But to do that, there is a need to clarify the nature of that expanding context in terms of its culture and, most importantly for me, its political economy. In this connection, I recently read the late Mark Fisher's Capitalist Realism, Is There an Alternative? From 2009. A critique of neoliberalism and its impact on various sectors, including education, in which the author argues, borrowing a statement attributed to cultural theorist Frederick Jameson and philosopher Slavoj Žižek, that it is easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. If there is an AI revolution taking place, it is taking place within capitalism, or rather, I would suggest, racial capitalism. And insofar as AI development and use is an engine of capitalism, and capitalism might be something that needs to be resisted, if not overcome, given the crises it has engendered, economic, environmental, etc., AI development and use might warrant resistance. Yet even if one reads the world differently to the way I do, and has a more optimistic view of AI, in inquiring about the ethical considerations for shaping the AI revolution, I insist on understanding the ethical, however construed, as always already entangled with concerns of power and political economy. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so very much for that, Mustafa. Catherine.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Yeah, thank you for putting this together, Gunjan, and for bringing us all together. My research doesn't centrally look at AI, although I am interested in how various technologies are produced and instrumentalized through racializing projects. I think I'm here because I was involved in developing some teaching materials along with several other sociology colleagues that introduced generative AI to students on D328, which is the sociology dissertation module, which is currently in production. And I'm currently serving as the sociology discipline AI rep. So at a national level, through the government AI opportunities action plan that Mustafa mentioned and that's mentioned in the framing of this session, there's a strong focus on opportunity of integrating AI into our daily lives, particularly our working lives, and using AI as a vehicle through which to spearhead economic growth and to place the UK as a world leader or perhaps an imperial power in this area. And in my view, this is all being done with very little regard to ethics, which is the topic of this panel. So I'm going to be sort of specifically talking a bit more about the OU and how we might want to think about this within SSGS and at an OU level. So as you're probably, many of you are aware, the OU has developed policies governing the use of AI for students, Gen AI for students, and there's been various resources developed by the library and others. And this student guidance focuses on guiding students on how to responsibly use AI tools without breaching copyright, without providing AI tools with personal data and OU materials, and advises students on the risks of AI, such as plagiarism, bias, and incorrect information. And more broadly, we know for our students that AI has increasing employability implications, both in terms of transferable skills and in terms of AI's threat to their livelihood through automation. I thought I could spend my brief time just talking about 3 additional ethical considerations that I think are important for our students to reflect on, and some of those touch on some of the themes that Mustafa was just talking about. And they have broader applicability beyond the OU, both nationally and globally. So if we're introducing students to these technologies, I think this wider context is important, and I'll outline these 3 things. So firstly, and this point is specific to our OU learners, generative AI prevents students from developing study and employability skills and can disempower students. There was this recent FAST scholarship project, which I urge you all to go and have a look at if you haven't, that sort of found that promoting learner identity could be a way of empowering students to away from using maybe Gen AI in some of their work. The study suggests that guidance on AI should really emphasise the potential of undermining learner sense of identity and agency through the inappropriate use of AI. Secondly, the outputs of Gen AI reproduce existing inequalities. Gen AI is predictive, it doesn't think for itself, and it relies on existing data and content. And given the fact that we're living in an unequal and unjust world, this content mirrors and reproduces existing stereotypes, prejudice, and bias. There's a lot of emerging research into this area. Sociologists at the University of Toronto found that ChatGPT is less likely to include references to and citations from women and women of colour specifically. And anecdotally, this is actually something I found when creating the VLE activities for D328 that use Gen AI. And similarly, a study into AI text-to-image generation by colleagues in Germany found that in AI-generated images, there was an underrepresentation of women and people of colour, and that women were noted to be younger than men, that all images tended to depict people of higher socioeconomic backgrounds, and that there was no representation of people with visible disabilities. So what kind of world is being generated through Gen AI? And I know that Suzanne, who's I think speaking next, I don't know if she's going to talk about this, but I know that she sort of, through her teaching experience, found some similar things. And thirdly, Gen AI is not without human and environmental cost and is embedded within patterns of exploitation and extraction. Gen AI platforms such as ChatGPT have environmental impacts. The International Energy Agency estimates that Gen AI and the data centres associated with it represent almost 2% of global energy demand, which is more than a large number of countries. And a report a few weeks ago in the Times found that writing a 100-word email using ChatGPT consumes 500 milliliter bottle of water, or enough energy to fully charge 7 iPhones. The batteries used in Gen AI data centres rely on lithium, a mineral whose extraction process involves human rights violations, land dispossession and exploitation on extreme scales in the Congo, as well as poor working conditions in the factories used to build machinery elsewhere. Gen AI's impacts are unevenly distributed, stratified to adversely affect already globally oppressed, dispossessed and marginalised populations. I don't outline these entanglements to paint Gen AI as a necessary evil, although I may want to. It can do much, for example, to assist or empower students with disabilities, but rather to situate it within the social world that we're teaching about within SSGS. I think framing Gen AI through this more global frame allows our students to make an informed choice about their usage. It reminds us that while we're continually talking about Gen AI as revolutionary, as fast-paced, as an ever-changing environment, these racialized and class-based inequalities don't seem to change. And this temporality through which we're framing AI masks the way in which it's becoming a vector through which existing patterns of inequality or our colonial historical present re-emerges and persists in similar or new ways. I'll end there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so very much for that, Catherine. Suzanne.
Hiya. So yeah, interesting opportunity to get lots of different perspectives on this subject, which I really welcome. And it was great start. Agree with most of the speakers. I'm going to take a slightly different tact. I'm not any kind of expert. I'm the module team chair for a level 2 module, where I've seen a fair amount of plagiarism cases with Gen AI, which of course we can't prove, but some of them are pretty glaringly obvious. And that's kind of spurred me to try to think about how we can responsibly engage with this, because I think the boat's already sailed, our students are using it, and we need to teach them. We have an ethical imperative to teach them how to think critically about AI, with many of the issues that have been raised previously, but also increasingly this is going to be part of the landscape of their lives, whether they want to engage with it or not. If you do an internet search, you get a predictive text generated answer. So it's not a question of can they avoid it. We need to teach them how to engage with it responsibly and critically. So we need to teach them how the knowledge is constructed to a certain extent, to think critically about what the outputs are, to think about the ethical, environmental impacts that Catherine's just outlined very well. One of the things that came out that I'd add to that when I did a tutorial on this with one of the ALs, was the potential for the Gen AI chat to be a kind of study partner available at all hours of the day, and how to teach students to think about the potential of a critical friend, as instead of like somewhere where you get the answers from. So I think that there's something of interest in equalizing opportunity, because many of us had the fortune to grow up with university educated people around us who we could say, like, how do I start this essay? What do I do to improve my thinking on this matter? What are the two sides of this argument? And if you ask, if you can learn how to engage with Gen AI in those ways, it can make critical thinking more efficient. But again, there's obviously this like those with the social capital and the critical thinking skills are the best poised to capitalize on whatever shortcuts Gen AI can present, and to become those on top of this new information economy. So how can we help our students engage in such a way that they are going to be employable, and they are going to be able to do the cost benefit analysis in whatever context they find themselves in. So I think the key questions that we need to think about are both how to integrate it into module production, and both Catherine and I have done a little bit of activities in level 3 modules, thinking about analyzing text produced by Gen AI, and also how to do it in assessments. And I'm going to show you just a quick visual example of deconstructing visual representations. But I really think that what has to be done is in the curriculum strategy and with ALs who are engaging with students, because some students don't want to engage at all. That's absolutely fine. Some students are plagiarizing. That's not fine. And some students are just kind of wondering, what does this have to do with anything? And because students are using these tools, I think we have a duty to teach them how to engage with them critically. So just so I don't take up too much more time, I'm going to share with you the way I'm changing the first assessment for TMA 1 in the second year religious studies module. And it already asks students to take a picture of what they think religion is and post it in an open studio tutor group forum. And this has worked quite well for a number of years. You get a really interesting, diverse range of local pictures, so local buildings of religious use, but also things like candles, things like football stadiums. And so you get a dialogue, which is exactly what we want to teach about what are the boundaries of religion as a concept. And so what I'm going to do for the part 2 of this is to ask them to critically reflect upon this Gen AI produced image of what religion is, compared to the real life examples they find. And this is obviously highly idealized, working on different kinds of constructions about religious buildings. There's no people in it, obviously. So I'll give some kind of suggestions about how this draws on certain stereotypes, and hopefully will generate some kind of interesting discussion between the messiness of real lived human experience, material culture, and this virtual generalization based on pattern recognition and existing predictive data based on whatever it's been fed into the system. So that's kind of where my thinking is at the moment on how to teach ethically our students to engage in this rapidly developing field. And I really look forward to hearing more best practice from other colleagues and refining what I'm doing. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so very much for that, Suzanne. Matt.
Hi, can I just share my screen? Is that okay?
Yes, of course. Please go on.
You see my screen?
Yes, we see all of it. So there we go.
Brilliant. How about that? Does that help?
Perfect.
Okay, that's brilliant. So this is a robot, a delivery robot in Milton Keynes, provided by the Starship, the company called Starships, which is located in Europe. And it is a delivery robot which is based on a hive mind, a system which is based on artificial intelligences. It actually learns where to go in the city. It learns routes, how to get through the city. When they are first introduced to urban environments, a human walks them round, a little bit like walking about loads of dogs or animals on a lead around a urban environment so that the robot can come to learn about it. It's got an array of 6 cameras at the front, and it can be taken over by a central control room should it get stuck. It knows about things like empathy, how to get your help. It stands by the crossing on the road and actually looks a bit helpless and tries to get you to press the button so that it can cross. It's liked by children in Milton Keynes, who tend to pat them and to treat them like small dogs. In fact, on some field observation, we spotted one small child trying to feed it a banana. And they're pretty popular on providing, I think it's a big novelty factor on providing very small items, such as you can order a pizza or you can get a newspaper perhaps through it. And indeed, in the pandemic, they were useful to some extent in providing essential supplies to marginalised people who, because there was a shortage of delivery drivers, and of course, outside was an unsafe space for humans. And that's a space that robots often go into. Far from perfect, though, far from perfect. Not least because of the accessibility issues. You think these are great. They can turn up at an older person's residence, or somebody who has a physical challenge, and the person can't actually lean down and open the box and get the materials out. So far from perfect. And I suppose really we did a case study which we've written about on several occasions, written some journal papers and some book chapters. And I suppose it was a case study really which raised lots of questions for us in research about, well, what is urban AI and where can you find it? Where is it located? It's in mechatronics here, to use the technical terms. What is it? Well, I'm not convinced it's at all intelligent. It's just machine learning, as my colleagues in STEM tell me. And also, though, we can find that it's in city management systems as well. And I think that raised all sorts of questions, which we tried to address in a book I wrote with Simon Marvin and colleagues from Sheffield and elsewhere. Raised all sorts of questions about how we manage these technologies. And very much the view is that cities are hit with all sorts of waves of socio-technical innovation. Before it was the smart city, and now it's kind of post-smart cities, artificial intelligences. And there's a lot of hype around these things, but nonetheless, I think there are material effects. and social effects which we can observe. There are two lines of inquiry, and I don't have any ready answers. It's so novel and quite difficult to deal with. The two lines of inquiry are, well, these robots, on the one hand, they're an object of governance, as Pauline McGuirk points out. They're something which we have to think about how we plan for them, and how we accept that they are out there, so they need to plan for, so that we can try to realise the public benefits of them and minimise their harms. And that's a political consideration, which is not easy. And the other thing is AI is actually in management systems, so it's like a governance actor. And how do you treat these governance actors? Well, I would say, I suppose, drawing on a little bit of geography, which I'm not sure whether I fully understand, that they are part of the network of quite technicised relations in the global north, which form the base, which constitute cities and urban environments. And we're really asking, how do they inflect these? And if they are out there and they're already in our governance networks, then how do we treat them? Do we treat them as a more than human actor? And then Reader's Senate, which I've quite liked reading of late, I've been thinking about, well, what is the craft of cooperation? We develop a craft of cooperation to cooperate with one another. How can we cooperate with these new technologies? So it's not a case of asking, well, what is an ideal society and how can we get these technologies to produce this ideal society? More, well, how do they change things? How do they change what is good and what's bad, what we consider as progress and what actually we may consider as transgression? So starting to ask those questions. I'm reminded by what Lang and Winner said, the STS researcher, that we may be sleepwalking into these technologies. They're actually out there, and I think that they will have critical time momentum. And I think if we are going to resist them, we will need to deliberately think about the power to resist and how that is formulated. And I think there's a real role for geography here, and for obviously therefore for planning, because they are somewhere. And we need to develop an appropriate set of spatial imaginations to conceptualise that and form the basis of governance actions. That's broadly where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that, Matt. I believe Soraya is next, I believe.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah. I'm not trying to share my screen if I can. Can you see something?
Not yet. No.
No. Okay. Let me see. Try again. Otherwise, I'll go without slides. Okay, don't worry. I'll go with those slides.
Right,
anyway, yeah, it's better. I've got 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Gujan, for this opportunity. And thanks for all four speakers with whom I sort of agree, mainly. I do have, maybe I'll start with what I prepared and then I may respond to Suzanne or just add on to what Suzanne said concerning the use of AI with OU students. So yeah, I mean, you may have heard that a British mathematician some time ago, maybe 2016, said that data is the new oil and AI is the new electricity, and this is kind of becoming the code that everyone is using. And this is where I think our government is heading towards. Having looked at the action plan as a starting point for this discussion, and all the critiques, and it is shocking that anything related to regulations or laws or whatever seems to be considered at the end. Really, based on the actual action plan. So we really want the revolution. Why do we want it? I don't know. It's not clear from the action plan. Is it worth entering a revolution right now? And at what cost as well for the government and for us as taxpayers as well? AI, as Mustafa said, is also a phrase that should be engaged with critically. What do we mean by AI? and why do we need it? I mean, do we really need it wherever it is now? Is AI something that is needed? Obviously, I mean, if we consider that it will be the next electricity, then I guess anyone who believes on that quote would definitely believe that it is certainly needed, even though they may not know what AI is exactly. And that's exactly what I think our students should first engage with, which is, I mean, we should teach them what AI is properly, and also we should teach them to engage critically with it. I mean, is it needed everywhere? And if it's needed, why, and what are the benefits, and what are the costs as well? I think Suzanne mentioned the sustainability issue with training AI systems. It's going to boom in the next few years. That claims now that I think to train all the AI systems in the world, we need energy that would be able to cover the Netherlands for a year. So the energy that is used by the Netherlands per year is what's needed for the world to make these AI in general, not only Gen AI systems work. So this is something that we should teach our students about before even teaching them the technicalities of AI, I suggest. And I think that everyone teaching or suggesting any tools for students to be used should teach this at level 1, really as a study skills. We don't we try. I'm hoping that in the OU at least we will try to be different and do this from scratch by design. So our students, when they engage, I mean, we are a university that was built and have a vision of social justice. So we should maybe make sure that our students are aware of these issues from scratch when they start in the OU, maybe as the first module in every OU degree. They should be aware of such issues, and obviously other issues and study skills, etc. In terms of what we're doing in our assessment, I just want to add on to what Suzanne said. I think the OU assessment policy now says, or at least what came to me, because obviously it's a catch-22 and I never know whether I'm looking at the latest policy. Students, we may tell students, for example, not to use Gen AI tools at all, or we say you may want to use them and just put that in your submission, or otherwise you are recommended to use them. I have big issues with this. There's the big problem with digital divide. We know that some of our students, maybe more than we think, share one computer per house. Some go and do their studies in libraries, and also those Gen AI tools. I mean, when we recommend them or don't recommend them, we're not giving them details. We have not gone through all those tools and checked whether they hallucinate or not. I mean, whether any content would be harmful to our students from different backgrounds, having different abilities, etc. And increasingly, I mean, ChatGPT, for example, just last year it was free. I mean, the pro version now is for $200. So would our students be able to pay 200 students to do their assessment? And what are we doing if our students simply resist using such tools? So this is for our students, same for our researchers. I'll be very quick here. Obviously, it is increasingly, Gen AI is increasingly used for research. There are, again, I mean, research journals and publication outlets give certain recommendations about the use of Gen AI, and it's all about saying, yeah, I used it. Again, they haven't, they don't go into the details of what to use and for what reason, and whether these tools are have been checked for various things. And the last thing is, again, the digital divide among the researchers themselves. Not all researchers can afford all those tools. So that's all for me.
Thank you so very much, Soraya, and thank you also for engaging with the earlier conversations. I think it's crucial to have that as part of the discussion. We have Emmanuel next.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
So thanks for all the presenters and thanks for inviting me. So I will come from a different perspective, which at some point it will be provocative as well, because I think that's what we need in terms of innovation. I think we have come to a time where there is a shift of paradigms, whether we like it or not, and that means that we need to start questioning the traditional mode of doing things, whether it is fit for purpose. And from my perspective and my research, it's because I'm fascinated about higher consciousness. I came into AI research with a view of another aspect of support for knowledge development, if that makes sense. So that's why I wrote an article, and I wrote the first book I wrote on guiding principle on AI for teaching and learning, which is published, and then I'm working on volume 2, which focus on employability, and volume 3 will focus on the ethical use of AI. So it built on it. Now, from what I have seen in terms of the development, talking to other people, going to Google and other places, the fundamental aspect of AI is how we engage with the technology. And from my perspective, it's never the technology, it's how human engage with any technology that comes up. So the issue is about ethics, equity, transparency, accountability, and also ensuring that there is a human oversight. So these are the 5 main things that are very important in terms of the use of AI, whether it's in teaching and learning or in society. So from that perspective, I came up with the guiding principle or in terms of teaching, how we could ethically integrate AI into education. So the guiding principle that I wrote, the first aspect is looking at how do we use AI as a tool, not as an end mean. This is very, very fundamentally is something that we need to differentiate, because anytime we talk about AI in teaching and learning, the assumption is that it is the end product. It's never the end product. It is a tool that is meant to help us maximize our teaching and learning, be innovative, and at the same time also help us to create a better environment for student experience. And that means that the traditional approach of education need to change and realign with innovation and technology. So one of the guiding principles is how do we use authentic assessment as a mode to develop student skills? So the idea is, for me, is to move away from knowledge citation to knowledge application. Because over the years, what education has done, what we have been told when we're at PhD level, it has to be knowledge application. What we were told at bachelor level is about cite knowledge. Cite is cite. You write an article and they look at the footnote or the reference to see how much authors have you cited. Now we are moving on, we are moving away from there. It's more about how can students apply this knowledge in the real world. So that means that there is a reversion order or a shift of paradigm in teaching. We now need to challenge students to apply their knowledge. So one principle that I talk about is using authentic assessment as one tool to ensure that students are able to use AI, but they are able to use it in a reflective thinking mode. So you can use an AI to generate an article, and you will know that it can cite references which are irrelevant and it does not exist. Produce this to the student, ask the student to reflect on this piece of work, and then ask them to write a reflective report. But within this reflective report, they should produce a step-by-step system to show how they have arrived at that conclusion, right? And then in the end, they should also show how this could be relevant in their workplace if they go out there to use this knowledge. So it is no more about critical thinking. It is critical thinking, but it's no more about critically explain a concept. It's more about critically apply a concept and show me how that will work in practice. So from me, from that perspective, the issue of academic integrity and cheating is irrelevant in my discourse, because I have to flip the way teaching is done, and I have to use AIs as an opportunity to maximize student experience. And then that will also fundamentally lead to another question of, what about equity? What about the student who do not have access to AI? So one of the discussion I had in the book is that institutions need to also take the responsibility about how they integrate AI in university environment. I know some other institutions have started adopting Microsoft Copilot, which students can use. These are some of the way we can do it to ensure ethical use of AI. Another aspect is training. We need to train, the staff need to be trained on how to use it. The student also need to be trained on how to use it, so that they will know the limitation of AI, because AI has limitation. It is not the end product. There will always be a human oversight. So one of the argument is training, and also training student about that as well. But I won't take so much time. We can have a good discussion about it in the Q&A, so I will stop it here.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much for that, Emmanuel. We have John next.
Hi, yeah. Try and pack this into 5 minutes. So thanks to the other speakers. I'm not going to overlap much with what they said. A summary of what I want to say is that AI is here right now, and it's about time we woke up and helped our students get up. I really follow, in terms of a philosophical standing, I follow what Luciano Floridi said. For a society to flourish, it only needs two things, and everything else will follow: good governance and good quality education. So we're talking about societal change here, and the OU, it should or is in a position to play a full part in that. In terms of AI being here right now, recent study, 88% of students are using ChatGPT at university. Every time you unlock your phone, walk with Strava, drive with GPS, listen or watch something online or bank online, you're using AI. AI is being used right now to make sure that our cameras focus on our faces and they're distinguished from our backgrounds in what you see. AI is being used in the audio that you hear to cut down background noise. So you can't step away from AI. Agents are coming this year that are already assistants that watch chat online and then understand problems, find the right computer code and fix it. So there'll be a whole set of agents appearing. In terms of some of the issues, I won't go into them, but there are techniques like distillation and local or open source models that can help with reducing energy costs. From an OU perspective, what often concerns me is that there are two icebergs in front of us, and most people can only see one. There's not just the financial iceberg, there's the AI iceberg. And if we don't watch this, it will destroy us. If we pay attention to AI that's here, it will help with the other iceberg, the financial one. AI for me is not a tool today. It's a societal transformation. It will transform our species, and the transformation will be as big as when we went from hunter-gatherers to farmers. Currently, my caricature of the OU position, in general, there are lots of interested people like the people on the call, but it's as if an ostrich married King Canute and had a baby. We really, really need to start going, because this is moving so much faster than we do. We didn't stand by as a TV, color TV, video, personal computers, the internet and the web, and we shouldn't stand by right now. We need to take our head collectively out of the sand and become a full player, and not just leave this societal revolution to the tech geeks like ourselves. As we become a full player, we need to scaffold for our students so that they can become full citizens in the AI world. To not do so would be morally a very bad thing to do. All of our students should be helped to learn about AI and use AI in the same way that we help our students to learn to navigate the internet today. A couple of examples of things we might do. I actually had a chat with Sir Tim Berners-Lee last Friday with Ian Pickup, and we think that we can create a lifelong learning coach. So a coach for life for students using some technologies that preserve privacy. It would do things like notice that today is sunny and say to a neurodiverse student, hey, instead of reading that long article, I'll turn it into a 2-person podcast, and then you can go for a walk and listen to this. Or I can see from your finances, your current job situation in the local market, that maybe you should consider studying full-time at the OU. And then here are some opportunities that you will have. We already have pilots of AI assistants for teaching, which we are running on OpenLearn right now. We have tools which we're piloting right now in FBL for using AI to write things. So I really think that we should start moving at speed to use AI in a responsible way, as all the other speakers said, but we need to do this now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so very much for that, John. We have Sonia next.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Gunjan, for the invitation to join this roundtable. Just to give a bit of a context to my position, I'm a senior lecturer and staff tutor here in SSGS, and many of you know I'm the co-convener of the SSGS Generative AI Working Group, along with Dan Taylor, who follows me in this presentation or this roundtable. We're not experts. We've just come from a point of interest. This means I'm coming from a point of opportunity, at least to start my contribution, with a focus on how can we support going forward. As Suzanne said earlier, the ship has sailed, and John has just kind of mentioned, has quite eloquently said, Gen AI is here. I'm not here representing the group, just using the conversations we've had within Gen AI group to recognise that there are many viewpoints, and hopefully something like this roundtable will continue to help inform and our understanding. I can recognise the discourse and the unknowns as to what is best as we go forward, and I'll return to the challenges in a moment. As well as my work within the Gen AI group here in SSGS, I've also been informed by a couple of pieces of research that I've undertaken myself, which I touch upon shortly. As I say, I see the opportunities, and I come from a point, similar to John, that we need to embrace these opportunities. We're all using Gen AI at the moment, whether it's through MS Word with the predictive what comes next word, or whether that's if your spelling's wrong, or every time we go onto Google, the first search is now Gen AI, as well as much more. There are many strands in the opportunities around Gen AI, and we haven't got time to look at them all, even within learning and teaching. But it would be amiss of me as a staff tutor and the employability lead for this school not to highlight the opportunities, or rather the responsibility we have through our teaching and learning to equip our students to study and learn with Gen AI to make them competitive in the future workforce. As well as continuing to work and teach their academic skills, this isn't about de-skilling, this is about upskilling. Many employers are now wanting critical thinkers who can work with Gen AI. I appreciate, as Catherine Carley mentioned, the work that Ed Wigley, Zoe Doy and I did in FASTIS, that the students were identifying that they weren't wanting to use Gen AI because they wanted to identify that the ALs could recognise their voice in their work. And this should be promoted, that Gen AI isn't the alternative, it is another skill, as we did with MS Word or the computers or whatever it is. It's just another skill within our and our students' armoury. Students, John mentioned pilot students are receiving help from Gen AI across the year, parts of the university. There's chat box to help with student support. That's not dissimilar to what Suzanne was suggesting in terms of study buddies. And we know, and the OU suggests some students use assistive technology, generative AI, to support their studies. But moving on now to how we can be supportive. There's some work that I recently did. It was published last month around kind of transforming pedagogy, if you like. And the work offered a systematic approach to think about integrating Gen AI into pedagogy, curriculum and assessment. The approach offers a staggered approach, not a all or nothing shift. But reflecting more on this research, it reminds me we actually have opportunities as those involved in learning and teaching to revisit here in the OU our assessment strategies and move away from the reliance on the written word and be more authentic, as Emmanuel suggested. Through our module production and lifecycle reviews, we can review and refresh the curriculum, to be ensuring that we're applying knowledge and further thinking about that, politics of knowledge production. And we have an opportunity here in the OU to embrace and in fact lead the 5th generation pedagogy, which is the experiential, skilled-based, flexible, distance and integrates intelligent technologies. Despite the opportunities and perhaps my positive spin on this, I'm not naive to the challenges or the need to take stock or regularly take stock. Along with, there are the ethical considerations already mentioned this afternoon. There are other practical implications on what does this mean for our teaching and learning. This is quite an overarching statement and can be broken down, as I can see with many of the points in the chat. Just as an initial list from me, it is initial, it's not complete. We do have the OU guidance, but are we providing enough support for our students? Is there enough behind that guidance? Is there enough understanding as to what that guidance means to us as we develop learning and teaching for our students? What do the categories mean? What do they look like? What do they feel like? What does good look like? And where we want to integrate or should integrate Gen AI into our teaching and learning, do we have the resources? Do we have the expertise? Do we need upskilling? And are we, as has previously mentioned, considering the digital divide? Colleagues here and elsewhere have discussed the ethical and environmental issues and the social justice and around Gen AI. Are we teaching it? Yes, we've heard from Suzanne and Catherine. Are we ensuring that we're not all teaching the same thing because it is relevant to all of our modules in SSGS and beyond SSGS? Can or should we have a collective approach for all? There are opportunities for scholarship, but the research is getting dated really quickly. Research published in 2024 is already out of date. We may become victims of the nature and time it takes us to undertake robust pedagogic research. So just as I kind of start to come to a close, just reflecting on that point, even the research that I mentioned with Ed and Zoe, we did that last year. Would we get the same results now? As the Guardian article last week saying the 88% of students are using Gen AI, would we get a different result? Do we need to revisit that, even though those students were talking about they want to maintain their voice? I'm thinking about the research I did around the transforming pedagogy, and it's not dissimilar to what Suzanne with her picture. I don't have a picture to show, but last year my Canadian colleagues asked ChatGPT for an image of an Inuit village, and it came back with igloos with laptops inside, and quite inappropriate. When we reran the prompt in January, we had a village with houses, but not on stilts. The houses need to be on stilts to minimise the impact of the permafrost. To the untrained eye, the latter image could have been deemed accurate. Whether it's imagery, written material, videos, we have the responsibility to ensure that we teach our students how to use Gen AI critically. We have to use it, have to recognise we're using it. We might be using it as our study buddy, as another person in the room, as we're all working at home and sort of more isolated, that we might go to Gen AI to go, Can you help? What do you think? But we have a responsibility within that ourselves to ensure that we're not starting a compounding teaching of misinformation, thinking about the images as an example, that if we think it's right, generation after generation or iteration or response from Gen AI after Gen AI will be compounding that error. I could go on, but I will now draw to a close. As I know I and we could discuss the challenges and as well as the opportunities, and probably have many queries and questions on what to do next and how we can go forward to be as supportive as possible. This roundtable has been a great opportunity as one of the opportunities to raise these questions, and Gunjan started us off with a question. We've got the opportunity for discussion next, coming up, but if you do have questions, particularly around learning and teaching, do send them to myself and Dan. We are collating questions to ask to try and get the answers to help you move forward. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so very much for that, Sonia. We have Dan next.
Yeah, hi all. I'll try to be brief. So you've had a very full buffet, and at the end of the buffet, you get the dessert. So I'm the jelly and cake section, but I'm afraid what I've got to say won't be so sweet. So I apologise. So Sonia and John have both talked about the report that was in The Guardian last week, which said that 88% of British students say that they're using generative AI, and this has gone up from 53% last year. So it's here. We've covered that point already. I'm going to put this report in the chat though, because it's well worth reading, and there's a couple more details I'm going to pull out. So as part of it being here, we're seeing massive investment in generative AI at the moment. And I think it just puts a lot of strain on our ability to understand as colleagues, but also our ability to produce meaningful module teaching around something that is constantly evolving and changing. Our modules operate on, it takes 3 years to produce a module. We change them every 10 years. And yet even in the last few weeks, we've got ChatGPT's deep research, which is very good. We've got Claude 3.7 now doing extended thinking. John was talking about, making a podcast out of resources. Google's Notebook LM does that. So whatever we put together now is obsolete in 6 months, let alone a year. Now, if we go back to that survey that was in The Guardian, the students were asked, why do you do it? Why are you using generative AI? So around half say it saves time, and a little more than half say it produces better work, which is interesting. What it also noted is that most of the students using it tend to be men. They tend to be wealthier men, and they tend to be doing STEM subjects. Now, we've heard from a few like Soraya, Emmanuel, and Liz in the chat around the divides. Catherine also alluded to the environmental impact. We know that may improve over time. There'll be increased efficiencies, things like DeepSeek. But there's also the digital divide, which has also been discussed, how that affects our SCISE students, how that has the generational aspect, which Liz drew out. I would say also a social class aspect, which I think Soraya was getting to as well in terms of the number of computers in a house. So the problem that we've got is that it's not a level playing field. And that's why I'm quite uncomfortable about saying it's here, we embrace it, or else. I don't think that, that doesn't address the level playing field. So kind of 3 points to leave it on. I think at the current moment, without adequate, good, responsive training for staff and students across the board, and free access to a kind of an OU GPT for all our students, we don't have a level playing field. And so I don't think at the moment, in my view, this is an independent view as a module co-chair and involved in work in SSGS around this, my own personal view is that I don't feel like we can ethically embrace it in the way that's been kind of explored at the moment. But in a way, that point doesn't matter because it's already here. It doesn't matter if I think it's ethical or unethical. If I go back to that, the point in the report about it saves time, does better work. The thing that worries me, and this touched on the de-skilling point and some of Kevin's points in the chat, my feeling is that we, as educators, we fail students on the challenge and commitment of learning by simply saying it's here, we can minimize some gaps. We're not addressing the level playing field. But my final point, I'm surprised it hasn't come up, so I'll bring it up now, is that our systems at the moment, say if you're a category 1 person like I am, our systems at the moment cannot really catch it. We have multiple different generative AI programs that write in different ways, that can imitate writing styles, that are becoming increasingly sophisticated. So in terms of enforcement, my own view, and this is where I'm going to come across like Grandpa Simpson, shouting at the clouds, if you know what I mean, is that I feel that there's no other way at the moment, if we are serious about the challenge and commitment of learning, than to go back to face-to-face exams and vivas, because I think otherwise our current electronic modes of assessment are too easy to cheat by those that know how, and we know from at least that report that it's wealthier guys. And I feel we disserve our students consequently. So that's it. Jelly and cake time over.
Great. Thank you so very much for that, Dan. And now our final speaker, Tracy.
I guess I'm also a jelly and cake. I'm probably taking this back a bit to some of the earlier presentations, but my research at the OU is about intersections of artificial intelligence and justice, social justice, restorative justice, really speaking to the theme of this event, and a kind of shift in power that means that justice can be secured over generations. So we can see right now in my own home country and in others what a kind of unsafe conviction of injustice looks like, and what neoliberal politics has given rise to. Mustafa and others have already spoken a little bit to this. But a lot of the research that my team is doing is around who gets to take part in the discourse around artificial intelligence and its ethics and who doesn't. When I'm thinking about both the harms and the benefits of AI, I tend to divide that question into different sets of stakeholders because both the harms and the benefits of this technology are likely to impact different groups of people differently. And that simple decision has brought me to re-examine a number of assumptions about AI technology, what it's good for and how it should be built, and what kinds of things we need to consider. And another part of the puzzle for me is that I also see an enormous iceberg, to use the metaphor that John did, around ethics, that most of the detail that we really need to understand is below the surface. And I also like that metaphor because it's simple. If you're a ship and you're plowing through the icy waters, by the time you see the tip of that iceberg, you've probably already hit it. And in the West, I feel like the only reason why we are even able to envision a possibility of an ethical AI is because we are able to outsource some of the violence of capitalism to the periphery. Catherine's already pointed out a couple of these things. Whether it's outsourcing distressing content management issues to Kenya or the Philippines, or it's about the inhumane conditions surrounding cobalt mining in DRC, there's always a group of people on the receiving end of the violence that is associated with technology. I might even go so far as to say that there is no such thing as ethical AI because of these interconnected relationships that I think in the West we largely continue to ignore. But for me, it's also about AI's ability to concentrate power. And the cumulative benefits of AI, or the cumulative harms, if you want to think about it in those terms, for me are most relevant when looking at how geopolitical systems are impacted by the technology. But a lot of people don't tend to appreciate this perspective because they think that there's nothing that they can immediately do about it, but I think you can. So AI is here, as John has said, and as a university, we can look at the systemic power asymmetries even within our institution and conduct thoughtful assessments about how AI is going to impact this. We can teach students about these things, as both Suzanne and John have suggested, and others. I'm sorry, I can't remember everything everybody said. There were so many wonderful perspectives, but I think it's important to remember that we're a university, and universities, as I understand their purpose, have many more roles than just in producing employable people. So as an institution, as a university, I think we can facilitate dialogues with students that help them to understand how their use of AI impacts the planet. We can talk about how we as an institution deal with that cognitive dissonance that allows us to be aware of all the exploitative aspects of AI and still want to use it. I think we can possibly avoid the neoliberal trap of avoiding hard conversations or buying into mythologies around AI that we don't have much evidence for. And one of the things that I think we should question is this idea that AI frees us up to do other things, and ask the question, okay, who's being freed up? What are we being freed up to do? And to this, I connect the idea of the university that is really embracing AI, if that is what we want to do, to think about what are the types of human knowledge that we will need for the future? How are we shaping our pedagogies to pull up and highlight the advantages and opportunities of human thinking? I think we can also talk about the distribution of benefit, develop and follow some principles around how savings from AI are going to be reinvested into the institution, like into the people. And in the absence of what I think would be like a truly ethical AI, at the very least, I think transparency is kind of the only way forward if we want to clear the water beneath the tip of that iceberg. Yeah, I really honestly feel that all of the other presenters have brought up and highlighted many of the things that I would have said at this point. So it would be my preference that we move into discussion, if that's all right.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much for that, Tracy. Yeah, on one hand, you've really summed up the discussion, but also given us some crucial points to think of. Before I open the Q&A up to all the audience, to the other speakers, are there things that you would like to respond to that you feel need to, that, you know, and I will sort of change some of the Zoom settings. But Emmanuel, please go on.
Yeah, it's just to respond to I'm sorry, I forgot the last scholar before Tracy.
Dan.
Dan, okay. So I think we need to be a little bit cautious when we're discussing about cheating. You know, it's something that I address in one of the chapters in my book. You know, the concept of using AI, right? You need the skills and expertise to prompt the system in order to have a valid output. You know, if you haven't got the skills and expertise to go in there, you will not find the relevant information. The second aspect, coming from a law perspective, what is the composition of plagiarism and how do you define it in a legal term, right? Because if you look at the actual definition of plagiarism, getting stuff from AI, unless you attribute human, which is a legal personality, to the machine, it is, I find it, I will struggle to say that you can accuse students for plagiarize when they use AI, because it does not fall into that category of the definition. So that means that the question is more about ethics and transparency rather than cheating. So if we keep on banging on student cheating, they will be scared to use the AI ethically, and they will, because they are scared to use it ethically, they will not use it in the correct way, and therefore lead to more cheating. But if you open it up as an institution and you educate everyone on how to use it, and train them on how to use it, and train them on the limitation, then it takes the kind of the fear factor out of the equation. So it becomes more accepted in the student discussion. So it's something that I think we need to be cautious about it. And then the final part, I won't take much time. The final part is also assessment. You know, we are very prone, and as an academic, territorial in terms of protecting what I'll call the status quo. Like, this is how it is done, and this is how we must do it. But the question is, how do we improve this? How do we innovate and realign our practice to the dynamics that is changing in society? This fundamentally, I think this is missing in our discussion. So for me, moving to Viva or exam does not really explain the question, because when we move into that, what we are trying to tell the student is to tell us what they've learned in class. With exam is testing the stress and the intensity of how student will cope. It doesn't tell me what the student will do in 3 years' time when they are in the real world. So we need to more question ourselves. What knowledge do we want to impart on this student? How do we perceive the student in terms of few years' time, their contribution to society? And the second aspect is, how do we create an environment where the student can use these skills in an evolving landscape, which is the lifelong learning aspect of education? I think these are the questions that we need to really try to address in terms of our practice, rather than worrying too much about cheating and all those things. Because whether we like it or not, some traditional university people pay for others to write assessment for them anyway, so it's nothing new. So we need to really think, is our current practice fit for purpose? How do we innovate and make sure that we are imparting knowledge on our students to bring the best out of them?
Great. I think so yeah, Dan, if you wanted to kick us off, but I think they're equally relevant for others as well. So if you others wanted to join in following Dan, please do so. Dan.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I want to be brief because there's loads of people in the meeting. They've probably got questions too. I mean, yeah, we take different sides in this, and this is what will make it productive as a debate. What is the goal of assessment? The goal of assessment is to test a student's understanding, and it's to motivate a student to develop that understanding in the first place. So if I get ChatGPT's deep research function and ask it to produce a 4,000 or 6,000 word paper on a topic, and I don't think you really need to spend a lot of time teaching students about ChatGPT as a chatbot, which is very easy to use. That piece of work may be produced. I kind of submit it. What makes that substantively different from an essay mill, the example that you gave, Emmanuel? I don't see a difference. So that's why I think in the current circumstances, that's why I make the case, even though it will not happen, I know that, for Vivas and face-to-face exams. Because if we think, you mentioned the word ethics, in a way ethics is moot because it's already happening, but the ethics around education is that we want our students to be motivated to understand, to think and write and study in their own words. Because if they don't do that, it's kind of like a really cheap essay mill that they've got access to increasingly with the deep research functions that we're seeing and even before. Anyway, that's my Grandpa Simpson point over and done with Gunjan.
Thank you so very much for that. Before we open any Q&A, are there any other comments, contributions from the speakers to this point? Matt?
I would say that it's not just a case of how we use AI in our educational system, but how we educate students to use AI when they go on and use it in their professional lives as well. So the nature of urban expertise is changing such that AI is becoming one actor in governance networks. And there's no exam which is going to overcome that, no form of assessment. They're going to have to learn how to use it. So the question may be, there's a broader question there about how we teach students to use it, not only in the courses, but also how to use it in their subsequent professional lives, whether they're an engineer, whether they're a planner, a geographer, or whatever they're doing. I think there are some broader considerations in play here.
Great. Thank you so very much for that.
Thank you for watching this GCSJ Roundtable. Please subscribe to this channel, follow us on social media or visit our website to learn more about the GCSJ Centre and future events.